I would like to warmly welcome you all for the Cinemalk Roundtable discussion on Funny Boy movie. First of all, I would like to know from each of you, how you get the invitation for the film and what's your role in the film? Nimi.
So I play Nalini, who is Arjie's mum, and she's known as Amma in the film. And it was actually 2 years before filming commenced that Deepa emailed me and asked me to do an audition. And I was very excited. And I did the audition, and then she came back saying it was all right, but she wanted to see whether I could take direction from her, and so I did it again with her direction. And then she liked it, and she said, but I have to meet you face to face. And she was in Canada, I was in Sri Lanka, and she was coming here with another film she had done. And so we met very briefly because I was going off to England to do some work, and she had just arrived that day. So I put a sari and I went to Cinnamon Grand, I think, to have a coffee. And then we had a chat, and then she said, you've got the job. So, but it took 2 years since then, because that's how long it took to make the film.
Brandon.
So I play Arjie, who is the title character, Funny Boy. And I know Deepa had been looking for an actor to play this role for about the 2 years since she had spoken to Nimi. It was last year, I think in June, Shyam sent me a message on Facebook, and he said, Deepa would like to audition you for Funny Boy. And then I realized, my God, he's talking about Deepa Mehta. When I said okay, she then mailed me, and our initial conversation happened on email because she was still in Canada. She came to Sri Lanka. We met also at the Cinnamon Grand and had a chat. And there was, there was stuff that we had to work through for some time. There was a back and forth. And then finally one day she called and she said, how would you like to play Arjie, the older Arjie? And I think I just freaked out. But I said yes. Yeah.
Rehan.
So I play Shehan in the film. I've known Deepa for a long time, and I worked on Midnight's Children. And then last year, I didn't really hear much from Deepa over like the 10 years between Midnight's Children and Funny Boy. And then last year, she had woken up in the middle of the night, and she'd remembered my face from set all those years ago. And she asked her assistant to drop me an email. So her assistant dropped me this email, hi, Deepa would like to know whether you act. To which I said, sure, of course I act. Which may have been exaggerating the truth a little, because I have zero acting experience. And they said, okay, cool, we'd like to see what you look like now, and here are 6 scenes. We want you to send us back a couple of self-tapes. So I had to look through the scenes, and I was like, I'm definitely not gonna get this. I'm sure there are far more deserving, more qualified people, but I'm gonna give it my best shot. So I did the scenes in my living room, and sent her the tapes. The very next day she responded. She said, hi, it's been a while. I watched your auditions, interesting. Could you maybe try it out like this? So I redid the scenes and got a response the following day. And she said, okay, that was good, but I want you to get up. I want you to walk around, use the room around you, impress me, go on. As you can imagine, I was mildly terrified at this point, So I did the scenes again, and I didn't hear from them for a while. And I was wondering whether they'd gotten the videos, because I was in London, they were in Toronto. And then I got a call on my phone a couple of weeks later, and she said, Rehan, we loved your auditions and we'd like to cast you. Are you free in October? And luck had it that I finished my master's in September and ended up flying out in October to shoot the film, so yeah.
Hidayat, what about you?
So I played Diggy, Arjie's older brother. How I got it was, I got a call from film team, and they said that Funny Boy is happening and Deepa Mehta is directing it, and to just to just expect a call sometime for an audition. And I was, but I didn't get a call. And then after about a few months, I got a call to come and audition for a different role. And then I auditioned for about 5, 6 roles, didn't get anything, didn't hear back. And then I was asked to come and conduct a few workshops for the children's cast. And then Deepa had said that she wants to meet me if I'm going to be working with the kids in the cast. And then I went and met her, and we were discussing the workshop, and then suddenly she stopped me and she was like, you know what, I think I want to give you a role. How would you like to play Diggy? And I had already auditioned for Diggy. It's like, yeah, and acting cool and just trying not to freak out, but went into the toilet and freaked out. And that was it.
Rubin.
I play Anil. Man, it's quite a long story because I had 2 years ago, nobody really knows this, I don't think even Shyam knows this. When I got to know that the film was happening, I think there were a few rumors going about. I had sent him a message saying, Shyam, I'm Ruvin from Sri Lanka, blah, blah, blah. I'm really looking forward to this thing, and can you just sort of like let me know when auditions are happening and blah, blah. This was ages ago. Actually, quite recently, I sent him a message and said, like, Shyam, by the way, and he has still not seen it. By the way, he's still not seen it.
He never reads his messages.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, so I also worked in Midnight Children, like a very small part. I was one of the children. I think you have to pause the frame to see me or something. I think when the auditions were happening, Deepa sent an email, and she got me to read for the role of Anil, and I did. I think the whole process took about, I don't know, 2 weeks or something. It was like a very stressed out, very intense sort of 2 weeks, because it's like, oh my God, there's a big film happening, and it's, it was all just, it was very crazy. So somehow I didn't get selected. I was very upset for a couple of days. Just as I was getting over that, then I got another email again because there were some changes in the cast, and I was selected for the role that I auditioned initially. So yeah, here I am.
Nimi, even though you are a Sri Lankan, you have lived most of your life abroad. So during the 80s, when this story is set, were you in Sri Lanka?
I was. I happened to be here when the 83 riots happened. We moved to England around 75, 1975, that is for you boys. When I was very, very young. And we had decided to try and come back and live. And so that was when we came back, just before the 83 riots. So I was here with my family, so I did experience, my family experienced incidents and situations that happened then.
Then how did you prepare for the character?
I mean, each time you get a role, you have your initial, you work through the script, you work through each line, you work through the arc of the script and each scene and each page, what these people mean to you. But this is the first time that I've been in a film that really resonated with me personally on so many levels. I read the book in 1997, and I was very excited even then that I thought it should have been made into a film then, and I do know that Gurinder Chadha also was involved in initially the first possible televised Funny Boy, but it never happened. And at the time, obviously, I wanted to play a different role, but I'm older now. And so I had a lot of backstory for this film, which is very unusual actually, and I felt very blessed. My mom is Tamil, and she's Colombo Tamil, and so I looked to her for the language and for the role, because I feel this woman is an extremely dignified human and a very traditional Tamil, and my mother was brought up like that, and she's a very dignified woman. And so I think I brought all that, hopefully, to the role. So I really pulled from my own history and my own experience and from my own family for this.
Brandon, you are playing a lead role in an international production with a world-renowned director. Would you please share that experience with us?
You know, I'm still not quite sure on most days that it has happened. I Google myself now and again.
It's good of you to admit that.
I know, I really do, at least 3 times a day. Because there's a basketball player also named Brandon Ingram, and he takes up a lot of my Google space, you know. But now when I type in Brandon Ingram, there I am. Like, you know, I come up, my vanity aside. Working with Deepa was such a humbling experience. Because you're looking at a woman at age 70 who still carries inside of her the excitement of a child, who is so fascinated by everything that she's doing, and who is so caring and giving to her actors. It was a thing that we all experienced on set, where, you know, we were always told it's important that you walk onto this set every day being of a certain frame of mind, feeling refreshed, and feeling the best that you can be. And you would think that someone like Deepa Mehta, that there were layers and layers that you had to go through to get to her. But from the point of the very first audition, when that first mail came to me from Deepa, and not from like her assistants, somebody's, it was with Deepa that I had the conversation. It was from that moment on that I realized that here's an individual, you know, who's letting herself be guided by a certain humility. And it was an outstanding experience. And I mean, the film itself, to be working with people like Ruvin, who I started my theatre career in Colombo with. We did our first play together. To be working with this amazing woman whom I have just like watched for years and years, whom in every single interview I have done, and I'm going to say this here too, I say she is the backbone of Funny Boy. She really is, and she binds us all together with the emotion that she brings to it. And to be in the same room as Seema Biswas, who is the Bandit Queen, right? The Bandit Queen played my grandmother. I hope we understand like how mind-blowing this is to just be like, hey Seema ji, do you want some tea? Dying inside slowly. So I'm so very thankful and so very grateful for this experience. I feel extremely blessed and extremely lucky to have done this, and also to connect with a character whom I identify with as someone who is queer, as someone who identifies as homosexual, as, you know, someone who has gone through what the character has gone through, but had a very different experience. All of these things were such a blessing and a privilege, I must say. Yeah.
Ruvin, you have worked in local and international productions, from theatre to television to cinema. So what was the difference in working in a local production and international productions?
I mean, there were a few differences, but I think more than anything, since I haven't really gone abroad and done a film yet. When production companies come here and then they sort of work together with like the local team, it's something what I saw in Funny Boy was there was such a bond. It was really wonderful to see, like, you know, everybody just sort of working together, from the drivers to the sound guys to everyone actually. It was really lovely. It was a lovely thing to sort of see and be around it. I think the difference would be, the only difference what I realized is, sadly to say, it's the financial aspect of it. How things are not really handled professionally when it's a local production. I'm so sorry to say that, but and I know where it sort of comes from also. Yeah, that's mainly the thing, I think. Yeah.
I just want to say that just working on Funny Boy and going through that experience, we know that it's not that there is an inability to do that.
Exactly.
Because there were so many local people involved in this production who brought their A game in terms of professionalism, right? So it just begs the question, does that happen because you are working with international people, the likes of Deepa Mehta? or are those not the people who work in your day-to-day? Because the Sri Lankan team who was involved, I mean, particularly, people like the people who designed our set, and just phenomenal.
I mean, Errol Kelly
Yeah.
was the art director, and it was phenomenal. He just brought so much for us as actors to step into this world.
Correct, and to watch people like Sharmila,
Yeah.
work, the attention to detail. We would show up on a set, and let's say it was our house. There was like pictures of us and as a family and how we graduated and all, which was never taken, you know. So she's like put all of these together with a great amount of detail. And I work with Sharmila on commercials and stuff, and I know that she brings that same level to everything that she does. So are these people who are absolutely professional and fantastic at what they do, having the opportunity locally, I think we must ask.
And
to-
given the value that they deserve.
Exactly.
Like Sundar, who,
Yes.
lighting, there's so many.
So
even
many.
even Prasad, Ishan, they're so professional. Prasad Pereira,
Ishan Iqbal.
Ishan Iqbal. Let's get all the names up. There's countless local. I mean, I've worked on local productions, and I work on international productions too. And the talent that we have here as cast and crew, is phenomenal. And I don't think that there is enough money being put into film production here, because it could be a massive money-making thing for economically for this country.
Yeah, and I think culturally speaking also, we are driven to this doctor, lawyer, engineer sort of identity that we have to if you hit one of those three, then you are successful. But the talent here in terms of what people bring to, as we have seen on a stage, and then of course to the screen, it's just, we've got a good thing here in this little island of ours. We should expand on it.
Hidayat, as a person who representing a minority race in Sri Lanka, how did you feel the character and the story?
Representing a minority in the sense I don't really recognize myself with any race, but I did grow up facing a lot of racial slurs and judgments and a lot of negative things, bad things. But then again, when I was acting in the film and when I had to look at Diggy and how he would deal with this tension and this reality, I sort of played what I wanted to be when I was in school, but wasn't able to, because when I was young, I sort of took everything in and just laughed at it or just never really handled it. But then as I grew older, I realized that did change me and traumatize me or whatever to an extent without me realizing it. But so I guess with that experience, I was able to see Diggy as someone who would not tolerate it, or there are scenes where he's a bit he is more assertive.
He's more
towards
empowered,
those.
isn't he? He stands up to the bullies, doesn't he?
I would have gone with annoying,
You're the one who goes,
But yeah, that sort of, it really helped having grown up like that and being able to at least have that experience to understand the character and do whatever.
Rehan, how did you feel about this character?
He's got a complex character. On the one hand, he's quite charismatic. He's very sophisticated, and I feel like he's a character with a lot of integrity. He's the kind of guy to stand up for the underdog, but I think there's a lot of internal conflict in there as well. I think his story is quite a tragic one as well, because his mother dies when he's 3, and his father kind of abandons him to go on these work trips. So he grows up quite lonely and insecure. I think a lot of his inner kind of instability comes from this lack of a central kind of nurturing presence. He's certainly somebody who, and perhaps that's why he kind of craves love and craves attention and craves company. So yeah, it's quite a complex character, I guess. Yeah.
There have been comments, posts, and some reviews on social media about the film within Sri Lanka and internationally. Some of them are criticizing the choice Deepa has made in this film. Some of them are asking to boycott the film as well. As artists who representing the film, what do you think about this? Brandon?
Wow, straight away. Okay. It's like this. I feel like film, any kind of art, has progressed into a place, especially with the digital era that we live in right now, and the way just communities and people have progressed in their political thinking, ethical behavior, what's right, wrong, what is representation, what is not. These are all questions that are happening at the same time, and now happening more than ever before, because we're all so close together, even though some of us are in Canada and some of us are in Sri Lanka and some of us are in Australia and so on and so forth. We all come together on global platforms of social media, and we're able to have these conversations more freely. I would say the first thing as a representative of the film I'd like to say is that we hear what people are saying. We acknowledge it. We empathize with it. And we are truly, truly sorry that sensitivities have been hurt. It wasn't our intention as actors. I can speak from truth and say that it wasn't Deepa's intention as a director, ever. That being said, I have to also say that the conversation on representation is something that evolves through time. We don't know what spaces we can go into sometimes, but we go in anyway. And in going into those spaces, we figure out what are the limits. Who can tell this story? Who can't? Is it someone who has, like most of us here, lived our entire lives on this island that was impacted by the events that started off in '83? Or does the right belong to people who cannot and do not live here because of that same reason? Does the right belong to, third and fourth generational trauma carriers? Or does that right lie solely with the person who wrote the book? Now, these are all very interesting questions. And representation was an easy conversation to have back in the day when you look at things like, why is Scarlett Johansson playing an Asian woman in Ghost in the Shell, right? That's somewhat an obvious and easy conversation to have. Much more complicated with Felicity Huffman playing a trans person in Trans America. But because she did that, because the Academy recognized it and she went on to be nominated for an award for it, suddenly we are able to have the conversation on why aren't people letting trans people play trans roles? When Brokeback Mountain came out, the world was really glad that the Academy had recognized it, that global storytelling had recognized that a gay love story can now be the central point of attention. But then it brought with it, why have two straight men been given roles that belong to gay people? So the politics of film, the politics of art continue to evolve. I do not buy into the idea that brown playing brown is okay. I think that we need to be a bit more evolved in our thinking because it is layered. It is layered, and we know as people who live on this island that race is something that was taught to us in school, So we know the differences here. For me and the role of RG, I approached it strictly from the point of view of his sexual orientation and the fact that I identify with it. I am also from a minority, the smallest minority. The burgers don't even get recognized, So I'm from a minority. I identify as gay. The only thing I am not is Tamil. And I think that in performing these roles, each person here came from that same empathy. you know. They brought a certain empathy, whether it was about the feeling of partition, whether it was about the feeling of the repression of women. There were different kinds of politics that were spoken about in the film. But still, do we have the right? We don't know. We are learning now as a result of this conversation happening. And thank God it is happening. So that's where I stand. I don't know.
Yeah, I have to definitely agree with Brandon. Because as a cast, I don't think it was our intention, and we've been, like how things are sort of happening now, it's been sort of portrayed as we intentionally did this, which was not. I mean, we all love the story. We all love this story so much, you know, so much. And it was an important story for us, as people in Sri Lanka more than anything, and as people who also support like rights and queer rights and all sorts of things, you know. And that's where we came from. That's why we were a part of it. And yeah, like you said, yeah, we should be way more open to these ideas now that it's out there. But yeah, but I just want to say I know for a fact that everybody is sorry about this, but it was not our intention to hurt anyone. Yeah.
Nimi, is there anything you would like to add to this?
I think I completely agree with the two, Brandon. I wasn't going to say the two boys again, but then I thought this is a serious part of the discussion, so I agree with Brandon and with Viren. But also coming from a perspective of an actor, and an actor that has worked in England. I mean, I grew up in England, so all my work has basically been in England except for a few films here. And I have taken on extremely serious roles to do with South Asian characters that are not Sri Lankan. And as an actor, it's amazing to be challenged and to have that ability to take on someone else. And I think that's an amazing thing, and that's why we all act. I wouldn't ever, you know, as South Asian actors, as actors of color, we tend to be pigeonholed into a certain type, you know, and I don't mind. I've played nurses, I've played nuns, I've played doctors. I played in a show called Doctors. But you want to be challenged continuously as actors, and you don't want to be pigeonholed into a... I've never ever gone for an audition as a Sri Lankan Tamil Sinhalese. If I waited for that role, I would be unemployed. And I think this is a lot to do with identity politics, and as such, the question is, does identity politics enter into art? And that's a discussion that definitely needs to be had. Yes. And we are here to have that discussion, not just, I mean, I'm not an expert, but I think as they both said, we are all open, and we assumed that there would be a discussion. I don't think we realized that there would be the amount of hate that has been brought into this. And I think that's a shame, because I think we are all, everybody from here to, you know, the whole spectrum that involves this film, all the communities that involve this film, we want, I think, as actors and in production, to be able to have an open discussion from a place that comes from kindness and love. And maybe I'll be attacked for saying that, but that's where I stand, that's my truth.
And you know, what about all of the healing that can come as a result of this? As a result of this story being told, a story that for 24 years, close to 3 decades, was not told. The fact that it is being told now, the fact that we can have conversations about erasure, the fact that we can have conversations about what went on here is a huge thing. I mean, I hosted, as most of us did, one of the first underground screenings that happened in Sri Lanka, because Deepa wanted Sri Lankans to be the first people who saw the film. My mother was at this screening. It was very emotional when the movie ended. And I think for the first time in my life, I heard her share a story that night of how I was born at, and they lived at the Mount Mary Railway bungalows, because both my grandfathers were locomotive drivers. And she told me that night that they hid people in their home who were being attacked by the riots and who were fleeing as a result of it, fleeing the mobs. And I didn't know this. You know, there's so much that we do not know about our own history, about how our families' lives connect with this history, about the roles they played. So there's so much that is forgotten, swept under, we don't talk about it anymore, and remembering is such a healthy way of healing. We remember not because we want to stir up the emotion of, you know, let's get all feisty and fight about this again. We remember so that we know not to go to those places again, so that we can remind generations that come after us, this model of hate does not work. It does not. Here is the example as to how it does not work. Let's try another direction and maybe fail, but let's try another direction that's not this. We can do that now, and we can have that conversation now as a result of what is going on here. And I think I'm very thankful for that.
Hidayat.
I could agree more with everything they said, and I've also been thinking about it a lot, and all I can arrive at is, apart from everything that they said, is that we just need to let things happen so that we can have discussions that are not had. Because I was not born at that time. I was born in '96, and just
I just said I read the book in '97.
yeah, I was having a small moment to myself when I heard it. But I learned so much by being in it or watching it later, and realized so many perspectives that were not offered to me growing up. And that's super important for us to grow. And so we should all just let things happen, you know, and then take it with an open mind and have that discussion, because we need to talk.
Brendan, you were very young during the 80s. Don't worry, I won't mention your age. But when you look back at the social political situation at that time, do you think much has changed?
Has it changed from what it was back then? Okay, so it's like this. I was born into the world that was a result of the events that, some of the events that we see in the film. It's not the only event, there's a lot happening in that film. So I was born into that world, and that sort of behavior, that sort of existence is what I knew most of my adult life until I was 24 years old. People are slowly starting to do the math. And it has been interesting for me to watch the patterns that we seem to be moving through. I always say that identity is something that we as Sri Lankans all, regardless of what race we come from, are struggling with. I've lived in the east of the country, in Arugambe, for 3 years, back and forth I was there. People don't believe that I am from here, you know. When I go to Kandy, everyone just automatically asks me, "Oya meheng neda?" Because, funnily enough, the only Sinhalese in my bloodline is from Kandy. And I find it very strange that wherever else I go in the country, they're like, "Oya kohinda?" But when I go to Kandy, they're like, "Meheng neda?" You know? So I think we're so fractured as a people as a result of the colonial hangover that we are still getting over. We're still, what, 72 or 3 years since independence? It's going to take a lot more than like 100 years and more for us to completely wash off what colonization did to us. Then we can start figuring out who are we as Sri Lankans. Because right now we know who we are as Tamils, who we are as Sinhalese. That's a real burger thing to do, no? Yeah. This one is, of course, I don't know what he is. You know, there's all these conversations on identity that we have in a very jokey sort of way, which when you sit and think about it, you really have to ask yourself, man, all of these different distinctions that we are coming up with is about Sri Lanka and Sri Lankans. We don't know who these people are. You know, we come up with a certain type of food. You take a polsambole, for instance. Everyone will make it in a different way and claim that the dish started with them, right? Baila came from my ancestors, the Portuguese, and not even like the white people, the darker skinned Portuguese, who, you know, used it as a form of getting over their trauma and the stresses in their life. But the Sinhalese will tell you that now it has become a part of our culture and it is ours. Yes, it is. But so are a lot of other things. So I think this struggle for identity is going to go on for a while. And we have seen the rise and fall of the other. Someone is always the other, that person who is not us. To get into our brain that these people that we're fighting with constantly, whether it was in '83 or whether it was in 2019 or whether it was yesterday or day before, these are Sri Lankans fighting against each other. And I think that's quite hilarious, you know, because we have places like Rwanda to look at for examples of what can happen when it goes completely to the other extreme and completely wrong. I hope we never have to go back to those places again. And I see the changes that are happening in the generation, not mine, in the one that comes after. Because that generation seems to have, they have their own things which I won't get into, but they seem to, for the most part, have washed away this race, class, status, all of these other things that make up an identity. I have hope for this Sri Lanka, my Sri Lanka. I have hope for it. But I don't think anything's going to fix itself today.
My last question is for all of you. Do you think Ajis and Shehans have better social political environment in present day Sri Lankan society?
I think you guys should answer that.
No,
And then we'll take it.
we'll start with you and we'll like, you know, go around the table.
Oh, okay. I mean, homosexuality is still criminalized, so nothing has changed. I think it has a lot to do, unfortunately, as a lot of things have to do in countries like Sri Lanka, in countries like India, in Bangladesh, it has a lot to do with class and caste. And so it probably would be easier from a social class perspective for a relationship like this to happen. If this relationship were to happen in a rural area, it would be a much different story. And so in that, I don't think anything has changed.
Hidayat?
Obviously, the situation is, it's bad and it's unfair and whatever, and it's what it has been forever. But if I just think about my life, I grew up homophobic. But now I've grown out of it, and by meeting people and peers that I work with, and sort of learn to understand and accept it. And it was hard. It took years for me to not feel awkward or weird when someone is not straight. But I've learned myself and grown out of it. So I guess it is changing, and it's like a escalating graph. So I guess there is a lot of good hope, and everyone should just be open and think outside everything that they've been taught in their wherever they were born into, the family or the race or the school they went to, or just try and understand it a bit more. So yeah, I feel like it's improving.
Rehan?
I mean, I feel like that is a question that perhaps others are better positioned to answer than myself, but as an ally, and these are conversations that I've had with friends from within the LGBT community. And in fact, I was just talking to a friend about this yesterday, a very close gay friend of mine, and it's, I mean, he was saying that he seems to think that things have certainly gotten better. There is more social acceptance, there is more media representation, but often that social acceptance, you know, as you kind of mentioned, is limited to certain privileged circles, and it's really the wealthy that are protected. In a society like Sri Lanka, homosexuality is still illegal. The LGBT community still faces a lot of discrimination, a lot of harassment, and Sri Lanka has a long way to go.
Ruvin, is there anything you would like to add?
So I was at a small party the other day. So my mother and my aunt were all of a sudden, I mean, they were just talking about the film, so when is it coming out, blah, blah, blah. So my aunt, she's going to be very angry if she sees it too. But they asked me, so what is Funny Boy about, you know? And I said, it's about this boy being in love with another boy, because that's the most simplest way I could explain it. And her immediate reaction was disgust. You know, she was like, "Ayyo, me wage film ekaka inne." You know, I just, you know, I mean, then obviously me being myself, I went on arguing about it a little bit, and like even my mother was kind of supporting. She wouldn't have supported it about like a few years ago, so I guess there's a little bit of change. But that's the thing. I think these sort of films, these sort of mediums will definitely help. Like I want her to see it. I want my aunt to see it. I want to sit her down and get her to watch the film, you know, because I think it's important. But that look that she had when I said that film is about this, I don't think I'll ever forget that. You know, like, and yeah.
I think a lot of the fear that comes from people on the subject is just because the right kinds of conversations haven't been had. And it's not just about homosexuality, it's about sexuality, period. We all know, having grown up in the Sri Lankan education system, when you get to the biology lesson of reproduction, your teacher or your sir says, "Lamai meka gedara gihilla kiyawa ganna." We don't know how children come into this world. There's so much of lajja baya about this subject. So then to go one step further and say that there are homosexual people also that exist in the world is just like mind-blowing. It's just like, oh, we don't talk about like the normal things. Why are we going to go in here? So I think movies like Funny Boy, as Ruvin said, allow for these conversations to happen more broadly. We know that Section 365 and 365A of the Penal Code criminalizes the acts. We also know that the Supreme Court has said that very specifically, people cannot be, you can't go after people simply based on their sexual orientation. I'm not saying the right words.
Arrested.
Arrested or just be...
Apprehended.
Yeah, all of the above. Mistreat. So, but then you have the example of India and 377 that was struck down, right? And I think it was very important. What happened there was that the court made the decision based on the fact that the state has no right, now I'm talking about the legality of it, that the state has no right to enter into the personal space of the individual and then say, this is how you're supposed to live your private life, right? What's the reason that Sri Lanka has a long way to go is because we don't have privacy laws in this country. We don't, it doesn't exist. So it's things that systemically have to be built in and brought. You think that these things happen in isolation, but they're all connected. This is connected to the legal system, is connected to the culture, is connected to family life and the way everything is built up.
And very much connected to ethnicity.
Very much connected to ethnicity, So I hope that Funny Boy will start those conversations too, and that more and more people will speak about it openly, address the issues at hand, and talk about the way that they're feeling, because feelings don't go away,
Thank you very much for coming to the roundtable discussion on Funny Boy movie, and hoping to see you all in another program.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Natasha.
Thank you so much.